Hey everybody, welcome to nap time. For our visual watchers, you can see that I am in a different location today. Have no fear. Today we're switching things up just a little bit. The vibe for today is going to be calm. It's going to be relaxing. I'm just going to be reading you guys some stories. The lights are going to be very dim, very minimal, just really enough that you could see me. And I just kind of want this to be a very sleepy episode. Since this podcast is called Nap Time, even though that stands for not another podcast time, I thought we would kind of lean into that for a bit for our 14th episode. So, after our introduction today, I will give you time to stop the podcast if you want to watch it at a sleepier time. But if not, stick around. We're still going to have fun. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. Last week was my boyfriend's birthday. Told you guys about this while he was on the episode, of course. It was on Saturday. And I threw him a Mario party to rival all Mario parties. I don't even have to hype myself up this much, but I killed that party. Absolutely slayed it. You can see some of the remnants of decorations from the party here. It's like 90% been taken down, but some of it's kind of really cute, and we actually kind of really like having it around, like the little piranha plants and gold cubes that are everywhere. He was Toad and I was Toadette for the party, so we've kind of kept up the Toad streamers because they're really cute. It was great. A smashing success. I perfectly adapted Mario Party 8, the Wii one, because that's the one that I have, into a life-size game here in my apartment. I had little spaces down on the floors that we would have to go through, different routes that you could take. I had a little star that I was moving around. Also, again, the place was decorated to the nines. I had like 17 mini games. It was a 15 turn round thing, but 17 mini games in case some of them didn't work or whatever. Battle mini games. You can see here, these little boxes is where I'm keeping their coins. I was keeping their coins and counting them out so that they weren't worrying about that and we didn't have to take time for everyone to stop and count their coins when they wanted something. I had spreadsheets with how many turns we were at, how many coins everyone had, if anyone had any candy, if anyone used any candy, how many spaces they moved, what spaces they landed on. That helped me keep track of the coins, helped me keep track, of course, when it was time for battle mini games and the shake things up. And in the end, when I was doing bonus stars off of those things that Mario Party 8 typically does, I had all the information there that I needed, so I could legitimately give bonus stars out. It was great. I had all these mini games and everything that I came up with, or their college drinking games, and I kind of adjusted them a little bit, slight tweaking, because Carter's niece was here and she's under 15, so we just kind of wanted to make sure that she felt included still. Yeah, it was absolutely so fun. Everyone showed up in costume like they were supposed to. I have a few videos and photos and everything. I'll post them at the end. A lot of faces are probably going to get blurred out because, again, someone that was there is under the age of 18. And also, I don't know if his brother-in-law wants to be posted on the internet. So, faces will be blurred out if their faces are in them. Otherwise, I'll be posting the photos and videos. They're very cute. As for the elusive birthday gift that I got him, it was actually more of a made him. And we love playing games. As you guys know, we absolutely adore it. So I made him a deck of cards. The container is a little wonky because they ended up being so thick that they didn't fit in an actual like deck of cards container. But these are his I Don't Play About You playing cards. And this is a photo from just a couple weeks ago when we went to a bricks and minifig store and made Lego versions of each other. Everything has like a theme to it. All the aces were photos of him with his family. All of the this suit. I don't remember suits. I'm so sorry. I think that's clubs. All the clubs were photos of him with mittens. All the diamonds were just photos of Mittens on her own, being just the cutest little ham in the whole ham land. All the jacks were photos of the three of us together. Queens were me, kings were him. Hearts were just photos of me and him from like Valentine's Day. And then spades, I want to say, were just photos of me and him throughout our relationship so far. So, that was his birthday gift. Very cute. I don't know how you guys are feeling about the Minecraft movie. I have like torn feelings on it myself. But I was craving McDonald's the other day. Super weird for me. And I went to McDonald's with boyfriend. And they have adult Happy Meals right now. And they're Minecraft themed. So each one gets like a little collectible inside of it. And I'm going to show you the collectible I got. I'm not going to show you the one that Carter got because I don't want you to see too many of them. This is a good little treasure chest that they have. Super cute. The Happy Meal itself was adorable. This seems really well thought out and had a lot of effort put into it, and I love that. So I have a little, item card that comes with it. I mean, how cute is this? It's a little Minecraft burger. A little Minecraft burger. I absolutely adore this. And I am keeping it. Also, adult Happy Meals are a thing that should have existed this whole time. Thank you very much. I have gotten a few responses from my birthday cards. Want to share them. So, first, we're going in order of least to most in the response, if that makes sense. So, first is going to be Kraft Heinz, who sent me back a typed up, very obviously just ready to go drafted email. But they sent it to me as a letter in the mail because I sent all my letters out like that. And it said, "Love that you love us. Thanks for loving us. Can't send you anything because we get so many requests." Kind of understandable on one hand. On the other hand, you're a real big company. Couldn't have sent me like a mayonnaise packet or something funny like that. Let's be for real here. Next on the list is Pepsi. They didn't send me a letter of any kind, but they did send me a rubber bracelet and a Pepsi logo sticker. So, I guess that's something. A step above that, Dallas Cowboys. Again, no written letter or anything, but they did include a picture of the team and a picture of the cheerleaders. Wasn't signed or anything, and then a little thing that tells me when the games are. So, bit cooler, very impersonal though. And then next level up from that, so far, the best thing that I've received back. It was so sweet and thoughtful and has made me very happy that I've been frequenting them. Golden Chick. They are fried chicken and they do it so well. I love them so much. I love the rolls. I love the chicken. I love the gravy, whatever. They sent me back a little stuffed animal. It's like this big. And it's their logo, their little chicken. It's got a little heart on the back. And a handwritten note telling me how much they appreciated me and how, like, people like me are why they keep doing what they're doing. Again, handwritten note. And then also a gift card for them with a handwritten, like, thing on the inside, like, saying happy birthday, we hope you enjoy this, we look forward to seeing you at your nearest location. It's corporate, but it's still personal. But it's not, like, crazy. I'm not expecting like $1 million from all of these people. I'm not even expecting a gift card from all these people. But they went with a gift card, and a handwritten letter. And that, I think, is just like, that's the mark of a company that I'm going to want to keep around. And I take a moment now, get prepared. The screen is about to get dark. If you already only listen to me, then you won't notice a change at all. However, I did just want to let you know that the stories that we're reading today are going to be a horror story specific to the state of Texas because it's so very easy to find those stories. A Norse mythology story, actually a few of them, and at least one Greek mythology story, and a poem. Let's get started. read a story from this book that I already own, The Vanished Texas Coast, because I do love a good ghost story. This story is called The Ghost Captain of the Texas. Ooh. The Texas led a pretty staid existence during its years as a U.S. Navy warship, retiring in 1946. Since 1948, it has been moved at the San Jacinto Battlefield Park, a monument to the men of Texas who served in World War I and World War II. Texas school kids helped raise money to move the battleship to a berth at the San Jacinto Monument. Even before World War I, it had exciting times. Its first deployment saw it support the U.S. occupation of Veracruz, Mexico. In 1914, supporting the landing made by U.S. Marines later on May 27, 1915, before the United States entered World War I. Texas participated in a dramatic rescue in the Atlantic. The Dutch steamship Rindam collided with another ship off Nantucket. The Texas assisted the crew and passengers of the steamer. Rindam's owners, the Holland American Line, gratefully presented Texas with a silver model of the 17th century. Dutch Admiral de Ruyter's flagship, De Zeven Provinciën, for this accomplishment. But nobody died at Veracruz or during the Rindam rescue, so there was no trauma to attach a ghost to Texas. During World War I, the British Grand Fleet, led by Texas, incidentally, encountered the German High Seas Fleet off Norway in 1918, the last time the two fleets would meet, and the outnumbered Germans turned tail and ran. Texas saw the tail end of the German fleet as it scampered back to port. Again, no casualties. Between the wars, Texas led the staid life of a peacetime U.S. Navy battleship. It served as a flagship in both the Atlantic and Pacific fleets, carried President Coolidge to Havana for the Pan American Conference in 1928, and went through numerous refits. Its crew spent most of its time keeping the ship spick and span. There were a few exciting events. It became the first U.S. Navy battleship to launch an aircraft. There was nothing that would have created a trauma ghost. In World War II, Texas served 3 years in the Atlantic before finishing the war in the Pacific. Texas escorted convoys early in the war. It was part of the Neutrality Patrol in the western North Atlantic in 1940 and 1941. In June of 1941, when the United States was still neutral, Texas was almost torpedoed by U-203. Fortunately, the German U-boat did not line up the shot. If it had, World War II's rallying cry might have been "Remember the Texas" instead of "Remember Pearl Harbor." Later, Texas provided gunnery support at North Africa, Normandy, Cherbourg, southern France, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. During that whole time, it only had 1 man killed in combat. Save for one battle off Cherbourg, when a pair of German shells struck it, it went through the war untouched. Even at Cherbourg, one of the shells was a dud. It's now on display at the battleship. Do not look to its Navy service for a haunting. There is a first-class candidate for an official ghost of the battleship Texas, John Tiger Jack McCowan. McCowan was a 30-year Navy man. McCowan served 13 of those years on Texas when it was a U.S. Navy warship, both before and during World War II. He retired from the U.S. Navy in 1948 as the Machinist Mate Chief Petty Officer. The last assignment before retiring was aboard Texas. He was part of the crew that rowed the ship from Baltimore, Maryland, where it had been laid up, to the San Jacinto battlefield off the Houston Ship Channel in Texas. After the handover ceremony in 1948, McCowan returned to Norfolk, Virginia to receive his discharge, but the old battleship called to him. McCowan headed back to Houston to take a job as one of the 2 assistant caretakers for the battleship. His tenure as an assistant caretaker was brief. Within 6 months, the other assistant caretaker and the caretaker were dismissed after having tangled with the Lloyd Gregory, then the head of the Battleship Texas Commission. McCowan was named caretaker, a job he would hold for the next 21 years. Cowan soon abandoned the title of caretaker of the Texas. He proclaimed himself to be the captain of the Texas. During working hours, he wore a uniform. It can be called a captain's uniform only for the 3rd Texas Navy, the one that never officially existed. It bore only incidental resemblance to any uniform of the United States Armed Forces. It was made up of bits and pieces of different uniforms. He wore a chief petty officer's coat with captain's rank insignia on it. He topped it with a white U.S. Army's officer's hat with the U.S. Army device on the front, replaced by the seal of the state of Texas. It was improbable and colorful. The former CPO reveled in wearing it. The caretaker's job also included free housing. In 1948, there was a small house next to the Texas for its superintendent. Instead, McCowan decided to live on the ship. He moved into the captain's quarters, a 4-room suite on the superstructure deck, the most spacious accommodation on the ship. It was grander than the stateroom and petty officer's quarters he shared when he was aboard Texas in his closing days in the Navy, and far better than the compartment he had slung a hammock in as a sailor. Even into the 1930s and World War II, ordinary sailors slept in hammocks aboard Texas. It was his home for the next 22 years. McCowan spent the next 2 decades a happy man. As he was a bachelor with no known relatives, the ship became home to McCowan and his family. 3 toy bulldogs, Jigs, Pogo, and Pat, lived aboard ship with him, and he spoiled them badly. When McCowan fixed himself a steak, he could not serve his dogs hamburger. He had to fix a separate steak for each of them. McCowan and his dogs became as much of a fixture aboard the ship as its guns and engine. Children who visited Texas were delighted by his dogs. McCowan was a great favorite with visitors who would come to hear his sea stories. He loved swapping memories with other veteran sailors who visited Texas. He was always ready to pose for a photo with an old shipmate. As far as McCowan was concerned, if you served in the U.S. Navy, especially during the big one, meaning World War II, you were a shipmate, even if you had never served aboard a ship with McCowan or even a ship on which McCowan had served. He was 5'7" and broad-shouldered, with bright blue eyes and a peppery temperament. He enjoyed playing the role of an irascible Irishman. While some of the sea stories he told might not have been real, what was real was his abiding love for Texas, the boat. He never married, but in a real sense was married to the Texas. To McCowan, it was my ship. Texas employees reported that McCowan roamed the lower decks of Texas at night. Completely familiar with the ship, he moved about in the dark with no lights. When night watchmen encountered him, he would tell them his old lady was talking to him. When interviewed by the press, McCowan frequently stated that he wanted to die on the ship. It was truly the great love of his life. He did not quite achieve that goal. In late 1969, he became too ill to continue his service. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer and hospitalized. Another World War II naval veteran was named McCowan's replacement as Texas's captain. Yet McCowan's heart remained with Texas. Racked with pain as he lay in bed dying of cancer, his eyes lit up whenever he spoke of my ship. He continued to worry about his lady. On cold days, he would tell friends from Texas who visited him to be sure to drain the ship's water lines. Finally, on February 11, 1970, stomach cancer defeated Tiger Jack and he died. Even in his final illness, his thoughts were on the ship. His will directed that he be cremated and asked for his ashes to be scattered in the waters around the Texas. Texas arrived at its San Jacinto battlefield berth on San Jacinto Day, April 21st. Ever since, Texas observed San Jacinto Days with festivities, celebrations, and ceremonies. On San Jacinto Day in 1970, 69 days after McCowan's death, his wishes were honored. In a memorial ceremony, his ashes were committed to the waters around Texas's berth. Even in death, McCowan remained with his lady. No one is saying there was a ghost on the Texas. After all, everyone knows there's no such thing as ghosts. But if there was a ghost, it would be Tiger Jack, standing watch over his old ship, including his time aboard Texas when he was in the Navy. He lived nearly half of his life aboard that ship. He was possessed by the ship during the last 2 decades of his life. He refused to be parted from the ship, even after death. There are reports of things moving around on Texas, misplaced objects mysteriously restored to their proper location, and litter collected before the staff could get to it. All of this can be explained by ordinary means, or perhaps it could be explained by a friendly spirit, the soul of a man who used to wander the ship at night, so familiar with it that he could move about in the dark without light, who is obsessed with seeing that things remain ship-shape. If you were on the Texas late at night, you might catch the scent of a Chesterfield on a tobacco-free ship, or hear what sounds for the world like the bark of a small bulldog. Perhaps you might hear echoing footsteps where no one is supposed to be, or see lights through the windows of the captain's cabin, lights that disappear when you go over there to check. It's possibly just your imagination. It could not possibly be Tiger Jack checking on his old ship, right? Next, I'm pulling back out a favorite that I've already read to you guys from. It's my Greek Myths and Tales book. I love it a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of different interpretations of stories and so many different variations out there. I do agree with a lot of the versions in this book. There are, of course, a couple that I don't. But today we are reading some of the myths of love and courage, starting with one of my favorites, which is going to be Orpheus and Eurydice. Gods and goddesses of Greece were the creators of the earth, makers of the universe, and rulers thereafter. In their hectic lives, governed by deep-seated jealousies, petty hatreds, overwhelming passion and love, and desperate bids for revenge, there were other beings, mortals, who led lives cast in the shadows of these greater entities. But it was also the acts of these mortals which became tools of understanding for the Greeks. For how could they make sense of the world in which they lived without the interaction of mankind with gods? From where came the echo in the deep valleys of Greece? How do you explain the powerful spirits of the woodland, the waters, the winds? These are the tales of mystery and enchantment, which form some of the most exquisite allegories in literature worldwide. They speak of love, desire, deceit, and trickery. They explain all. Starting with Orpheus and Eurydice. The music of Orpheus was known across the lands. With his lyre he played the sweetest strains which lulled even the fiercest beasts into a peaceful rapture. For his music, Orpheus was loved, and he traveled far and wide, issuing forth melodies that were pure, sublime. Orpheus was the son of Apollo and the muse Calliope. He lived in Thrace and spent his days singing, playing the music that spread his fame still further. One day, Orpheus came across a gentle and very beautiful young nymph, who danced to his music as if she was born to do so. She was called Eurydice, and wings seemed to lift her heels as she played and frolicked to his music, and then, when their eyes caught, it was clear that it was love at first sight and that their destiny was to be shared. It was only a few days later that they were joined in marriage, and never before had such an angelic couple existed. As they danced on the eve of their wedding, the very trees and flowers, the winds and rushing streams paused and then shouted their congratulations. The world stopped to watch, to approve, to celebrate. And then, that most sinister of animals, a stealthy viper, made its way into the babbling midst and struck at the ankle of Eurydice, sending her to an icy, instant death. Eurydice sank down in the circle, and all efforts to revive her failed. Time seemed to stop. Certainly there was no music anywhere. Orpheus was disconsolate with grief. He could not even bring himself to bury her, and he played on his lyre such tunes that even the rocks, the hardened fabric of the caves, shed tears. After several days he came to a decision which seemed at once as clear and as necessary as anything he had ever undertaken. Orpheus made his way to the underworld. Determined to rescue his great love, his lyre in hand, his heart pounding with emotion, he reached the river Styx, the black waterway which snakes its way into the underworld, which divides the other world from our own. There he played his lute so tunefully, so eloquently, that Charon, the ferryman, took him across the river at no charge, granted access to a place into which no mortal must go. As Orpheus was drawn deeper into the underworld, grisly, frightening sights greeted his eyes. But he continued to play his soulful tune, filling with tears the eyes of those cast in wretched purgatory, the ghosts of beings who had done ill deeds, the spirits of men who had been cursed. He played on and on, his music seeping into the blackness and creating an effortless light which guided the way. At the end of his journey, King Hades and Queen Persephone sat, entranced by his music. They knew of his mission. They would allow him to take Eurydice. His music had unwound the rigors of their rules, of their laws, and momentarily appeased, temporarily relaxed, they permitted Orpheus to take one of their own. There was a condition, as there is in all such matters. Orpheus could have his bride returned to him. She would follow him as his shadow, but he must not look back on his trip from their world. The music from Orpheus's lyre picked up the timbre of his pleasure and took on a jaunty character which brought a look of surprise to the stony faces of Hades' guards. Orpheus turned and made his way back to the Styx, to his world, to home and Eurydice. The gate of the underworld was in sight when Orpheus felt an overwhelming need to confirm that Eurydice was there. Instinctively, he turned towards his great love, and there she stood, shrouded in a black, dark cape. As he reached for her, just as he felt the warmth of her skin, her breath on his cheek, she vanished, drawn back into death, into the darkened world of the afterlife. Orpheus left the underworld alone, and when he returned to his land, he lay broken and wasted on the shores of the Styx. For the rest of his short life, he wandered among the hills, carrying a broken lyre, which he would not mend and could not play. He cared for nothing. He was attacked, one day, without the powers to play, to appease his enemy. His attackers were a throng of Thracian women who killed him and tore him to pieces. His lyre was taken to Lesbos, where it became a shrine, and some years later his head was washed upon the shores of the island. There it was joined with his sacred lyre, its broken strings representing forever the broken heart of Orpheus. This next story is of Echo and Narcissus. Echo was a wood nymph who danced and sang in the forest. She told engaging stories to anyone who would listen, and although she was adored by the other nymphs, her headstrong ways meant that none of her playmates had the last word. Echo would skip and frolic among the trees, charming the small creatures and befriending the forest folk as she played. Hera was enchanted by the nubile young nymph, and she came daily to hear Echo's tales of adventure, of fairies, and of far-off places. Stories that grew ever more complicated with each telling. One day, Hera left earlier than usual, inspired to see her husband Zeus by Echo's romantic tales. It was on this day that Hera was presented with evidence of her husband's philanderings and discovered that Echo had been involved in subterfuge, receiving a wage from Zeus to occupy his lovely wife. Hera flew into a rage which resounded through the kingdom, and the victim of her wrath was Echo, who was stripped of her power of speech, able only to echo the last words spoken by any person. Echo fled deep into the forest, tortured by her speechlessness, drained of her life and her vitality. Now in the same forest lived a handsome young man named Narcissus, a thespian and the son of the blue nymph Lairope and the river god Cephissus. When Narcissus was but a child, his mother consulted the seer Tiresias to learn of his fortune. Would he live to old age? She longed to know. If he never knows himself, said the wise man. Tales of Narcissus' beauty had spread far and wide, and it was not long before he grew conceited and self-satisfied. Lovers came and went, but Narcissus' heart grew colder, frosted by the knowledge that none could match his charm and grace. Echo had been drawn to the youth for many months, and secretly followed him in the forest, begging him silently to speak so she could make her presence known. One day her wish was granted, and Narcissus, who had lost his companions in the forest, called out, "Is anyone here?" "Here!" cried the young nymph with delight. "Come!" replied Narcissus, his face a haughty mask. "Come!" repeated Echo. "Why do you avoid me?" asked Narcissus, a surprised look crossing his face. "Why do you avoid me?" said Echo. "Let us come together," he shouted with careless confidence. He looked purposefully around, his manly brow furrowed with intrigue. "Let us come together," and as the words tumbled from Echo's tender lips, she leapt from her hiding place and threw herself against the comely young man. He stepped back in horror, roughly detaching himself from her grasp and snarling, "I will die before you ever lay with me." Summoning up the arrogance of his youth, he cast Echo aside and left the clearing, failing to hear her pleading, "Lay with me," as he stalked away. Echo grew cold with misery, and, unable to draw breath, she lay still and pined for her lost love, the vessel for her childish hopes and aspirations. There Echo laid until she was no more than her voice, her tiny body becoming one with the woodland floor. Narcissus quickly forgot this uneasy encounter, and carried on his relentless search for love. One day, deep in the forest, he stopped his hunting in order to take a drink from a pure, clear stream. As he leant over the crystal waters, he was caught by such a sight of beauty that his breath escaped in a stunned gasp. There, in this magical current, was a face of such perfect loveliness that Narcissus was unable to move, to call out. He reached forward to the elegant face, the princely features, but alas, with every movement, the object of his passion disappeared in a kaleidoscope of color. Narcissus had fallen in love with his own reflection, and he was held captive by its magnificence. He reclined by the stream, unable to move, and there he lay without food or water until he too pined away to become one with the forest. The last words to slip from his aristocratic lips were, "O youth beloved in vain, farewell," to which the spirit of the love-sickened nymph Echo replied, "Farewell." Those who had once swooned for Narcissus prepared his funeral pyre, but his body had disappeared. In its place grew a slim and elegant flower with a blood-red heart, which gazed piteously at its reflection as it dipped over the water. Today this flower can be found by the waters of certain streams, a flower known for its beauty, which gazes eternally at its own reflection. The spirit of Echo is often heard, for she fled that forest, and wanders far from the shores of that stream, ever searching for her lost love, and of course, her voice. Icarus and Daedalus. In the city of Athens lived Daedalus, an inventor and artisan renowned across the world for his skill and genius. He loved nothing more than to create masterpieces of invention and wonder, accept the recognition and admiration his talents won him. On fearing that his nephew and apprentice would one day surpass his lofty skills, Daedalus murdered the boy in cold blood. He and his family then fled to Crete. It was here that King Minos requested his service for a very special purpose. The king had a monster living among his household, one that was cursed with insatiable, unnatural appetites. This miscreation was the Minotaur, the half-bull, half-human progeny of Minos' wife, Pasiphae. Pasiphae had been enchanted to fall in love with the bull of Poseidon. Blood boiling in lust for the magnificent beast, Pasiphae demanded that Daedalus build her a contraption so that the bull could mount her. The resulting offspring was the atrocity that grew into the uncontrollable Minotaur. Seeking advice from the Delphic oracle, Minos was told to build a creation dense and elaborate enough to house the beast safely. For this, Minos needed Daedalus. Eager to test his skills, Daedalus accepted, and, taking his son Icarus, he set off to Minos' palace to begin work on the labyrinth, which would be his most extraordinary work. The labyrinth was an immense maze in the ground of Minos' palace. Daedalus used every method he could think of in the formation of his masterpiece: dead ends, winding passages, shadowy corners, and pathways that never seemed to end, driving anyone trapped within to the very edge of insanity and beyond. So cunning was the labyrinth that Daedalus himself was almost doomed among its dark and convoluted corridors. The complex twists and perplexing turns successfully trapped the Minotaur, who was kept contented by annual sacrifices of 7 youths and 7 maidens for him to hunt down and gorge upon at will. Minos did not react as Daedalus expected. Instead of showering him with praise and riches, the king was desperate to ensure that no one would ever discover the secret of the great labyrinth. He trapped Daedalus and his son in a tall tower to ensure that the dark mystery of the labyrinth would forever be protected. And so the days passed, but Minos would not release his prisoners. He even took the precaution of having the routes out of Crete by both land and sea guarded. But Daedalus was also crafty, as well as resourceful. The time came when he grew desperately weary of his enforced capture. Never forgetting that his beloved son had been imprisoned because of his ambition and love of fame, Daedalus plotted to win their freedom. He began collecting the supplies they would need for their escape. Careful not to arouse suspicion in the king, he knew he would have to use natural objects where possible. He also knew that Minos was watching the roads and sea, which left only one way for escape. They would have to fly. Daedalus set to work making wings for himself and Icarus. Basing them on the natural curve of a bird's wing, he carefully bound together layers and layers of feathers with cord and sealed the binding with wax, without which the feathers would be pulled out of the cords during flight. He took the utmost care in his creation, placing the wings in order of size from smallest to largest. Finally, the instruments of freedom were ready. Trailing them, he strapped his wings in place and flapped his arms. Movement caught in the wind and lifted him up into the air, where he was able to hover above the ground. Ecstatic with joy at the thought of their approaching freedom, Icarus, a tempestuous boy with little of his father's foresight, wanted immediately to set off for home. Tempering his son's eagerness, Daedalus again impressed upon Icarus how to get home safely. They had to avoid both the spray from the sea that would weigh down the wings and the heat from the sun, which would melt the wax securing the wings together. Father and son took flight, leaving their tower of captivity forever. As they flew, Crete growing smaller behind them, both grew lighter at heart at the thought of home. Passing landmarks, ever hopeful that they would reach the shores of Athens, Daedalus' heart filled with heavy pride at his construction, but he was overconfident. His invention, masterful as it was imperfect. Icarus, his reckless boy, had inherited some of his father's ego. Feeling invincible, all warnings about how to fly safely flew from his mind. As the Aegean Sea glittered beneath him, Icarus felt like a king up there in the heavens. So he flew higher and higher, so as to fly among the gods. However, the blazing sun caused the wax holding his precious wings together to melt. Desperately trying to regain control, Icarus swooped downwards to escape the sun's burning rays, but it was too late. Before his father could even make a move to help him, Icarus, with barely time to give his beloved father one final glance, plummeted to his death. Landing heavily in the deep, dark sea, Icarus breathed his last. Racked with grief, Daedalus was almost unable to complete his journey home, the sweet sensation of liberty forever tainted by his tragic loss. In homage to his son, and as a permanent reminder of the grief and loss caused by his pride and arrogance, Daedalus named the land nearest to Icarus's place of death Icaria, which it remains to this day. So those are a couple Greek stories, and to finish us off today, we will be reading some Norse myth and tales. Same company made this book. As you can see, it's beautiful, but the Greek book is kind of like a rusted orange, which is really pretty, and the Norse book is this beautiful blue. I figured we would just start at the beginning. The creation of the universe. In the beginning, before there was anything at all, there was a nothingness that stretched as far as there was space. There was no sand nor sea, no waves nor earth nor heavens. And that space was a void that called to be filled, for its emptiness echoed with a deep and frozen silence. So it was that a land sprung up within that silence, and it took the place of half the universe. It was a land called Filheim, or Land of Fog, and where it ended sprung another land, where the air burned and blazed. This land was called Muspel. Where the regions met lay a great and profound void called Ginnungagap. And here a peaceful river flowed, softly spreading into the frosty depths of the void where it froze, layer upon layer until it formed a fundament. And it was here the heat from Muspel licked at the cold of Filheim until the energy they created spawned the great frost giant Ymir. Ymir was the greatest and the first of all frost giants, and his part in the creation of the universe led the frost giants to believe that they should reign supreme on what he had made. Filheim had existed for many ages, long before our own earth was created. In the center was a mighty fountain, and it was called Vrugomil. And from the great fountain, all the rivers of the universe bubbled and stormed. There was another fountain called Ilivagar, although some believe that it is the same fountain with a different name, and from this bubbled up a poisonous mass which hardened into black ice. Ilivagar is the beginning of evil, for goodness could never be black. Muspel burned with eternal light, and her heat was guarded by the flame giant Surtur, who lashed at the air with his great saber, filling it with glittering sparks of pure heat. Surtur was the fiercest of the fire giants, who would one day make Muspel their home. The word Muspel means home of the destroyers of the world, and that description is both frightening and accurate because the fire giants were the most terrifying there were. On the other side of the slowly filling chasm, Wilhelm lay in perpetual darkness, bathed in mists which circled and spun until all was masked. Here, between these stark contrasts, Ymir grew, the personification of the frozen ocean, the product of chaos. Fire and ice met here, and it was these profound contrasts that created a phenomenon like no other, and this was life itself. In the chasm, another form was created by the frozen river, where the sparks of Surtur's saber caused the ice to drip and to thaw, and then, when they rested, allowed it to freeze once again. This form was Audhumla, a cow who became known as the Nourisher. Her udders were swollen with rich, pure milk, and Ymir drank greedily from the 4 rivers which formed from them. Audhumla was a vast creature, spreading across the space to where the fire met the ice. Her legs were columns, and they held up the corners of space. Audhumla, the cow, also needed sustenance, and so she licked at the rime stones which had formed from the crusted ice, and from these stones she drew salt from the depths of the earth. Audhumla licked continuously, and soon there appeared under her thirsty tongue the form of a god. On the first day there appeared hair, and on the second a head. On the third day the whole god was freed from the ice, and he stepped forth as Buri, also called the producer. Buri was beautiful. He had taken the golden flames of the fire, which gave him a warm, gilded glow, and from the frost and ice he had drawn a purity, a freshness that could never be matched. While Audhumla licked, Ymir slept, sated by the warmth of her milk. Under his arms the perspiration formed a son and a daughter, and his feet produced a giant called Thrudmir, an evil frost giant with 6 heads, who went on to bear his own son, the giant Bergelmir. These were the first of the race of frost giants. Buri himself had produced a son called Bor, which is another word for born, and as Buri and Bor became aware of the giants, an eternal battle was begun, one which is to this day waged on all parts of earth and heaven. For giants represent evil in its many forms, and gods represent all that is good, and on that fateful day the fundamental conflict between them began, a cosmic battle which would create the world as we know it. Buri and Bor fought against the giants, but by the close of each day a stalemate existed, and so it was that Bor married the giantess Besla, who was the daughter of Bolthorn, or the Thorn of Evil. Besla was to give him 3 fine, strong sons, Odin, Vili, and Vi, and with the combined forces of these brave boys, Bor was able to destroy the great Ymir. As they slayed him, a tremendous flood burst forth from his body, covering the earth and all the evil beings who inhabited it with his rich red blood. The creation of the earth. Ymir's body was carried by Odin and his brothers to Ginnungagap, where it was placed in the center. His flesh became the earth, and his skeleton the rocky crags which dipped and soared. From the soil sprang dwarfs spontaneously, and they would soon be put to work. Ymir's teeth and shards of broken bones became the rocks and pits covering the earth, and his blood was cleared to become the seas and waters that flowed across the land. The three men worked hard on the body of Ymir. His vast size meant that even a day's work would alter the corpse only slightly. Ymir's skull became the sky, and at each cardinal point of the compass was placed a dwarf whose supreme job it was to support it. These dwarfs were Nordi, Sudri, Austri, and Westri, and it was from these brave and sturdy dwarfs that the terms north, south, east, and west were born. Ymir's hair created trees and bushes. The brow of Ymir became walls which would protect the gods from all evil creatures, and in the very center of these brows was Midgard, or Middle Garden, where humans could live safely. Now almost all of the giants had fallen with the death of Ymir, drowned by his surging blood. All, that is, except Bergelmir, who escaped in a boat with his wife and sought asylum at the edge of the world. Here he created a new world, Jotunheim, or the home of the giants, where he set about the creation of a whole new breed of giants who would carry on his evil deeds. Odin and his brothers had not yet completed their work. As the earth took on its present form, they slaved at Ymir's corpse to create greater and finer things. Ymir's brains were thrust into the skies to become clouds, and in order to light this new world, they secured the sparks from Surtur's saber and dotted them among the clouds. The finest sparks were put to one side, and they studded the heavenly vault with them. They became like glittering stars in the darkness. The stars were given positions. Some were told to pass forward and then back again in the heavens. This provided seasons, which were duly recorded. The brightest of the remaining stars were joined together to become the sun and the moon, and they were sent out into the darkness in gleaming gold chariots. The chariots were drawn by Arvakr, the early waker, and Alsfin, the rapid goer, two magnificent white horses, under whom were placed balls of cool air which had been trapped in great skins. A shield was placed before the sun so that her rays would not harm the milky hides of the steeds as they traveled into the darkness. Although the moon and the sun had now been created, and they were sent out on their own chariots, there was still no distinction between night and day, and that is the story of its own. And we're gonna read it. The chariots were ready, and the steeds were bursting at their harnesses to tend to the prestigious task of setting night and day in place. But who would guide them? The horses would need leadership of some sort, and so it was decided that the beautiful children of the giant Mundilfari, Bani, the moon, and Sol, the sun, would be given the direction of the steeds, and at once they were launched into the heavens. Next, Naut, Night, who was the daughter of one of the giants, Norvi, was provided with a rich black chariot, which was drawn by a lustrous stallion called Hrimfaxi, or Frostmane. From his mane the frost and dew were sent down to the earth in glimmering baubles. Naut was a goddess, and she had produced 3 children, each with a different father. From Naglfari she had a son named Aud. Anar, her second husband, gave her Jord, meaning earth, and with her third husband, the god Dellinger, a son who was born, and he was called Dag, which means day. Dag was the most radiant of her children, and his beauty caused all who saw him to bend down in tears of rapture. He was given his own great chariot, drawn by a perfect white horse, called Skinfaxi, Shining Mane, And as they traveled, wondrous beams of light shot out in every direction, brightening every dark corner of the world and providing much happiness to all. Many believed that the chariots flew so quickly and continued their journey round and round the world because they were pursued by wolves, Skol, repulsion, and Hati, hatred. These evil wolves sought a way to create eternal darkness, and like the perpetual battle of good and evil, there could be no end to their chase. Mani brought along in his chariot Hayuki, who represented the waxing moon, and Bil, who was the waning moon. And so it was that sun, moon, day, and night were in place, with evening, midnight, morning, forenoon, noon, and afternoon sent to accompany them. Summer and winter were rulers of all seasons. Summer was a popular and warm god, a descendant of Svasud. Winter was an enemy, for he represented all that contrasted with summer, including the icy winds which blew cold and unhappiness over the earth. It was believed that the great frost giant Krasvgir sat on the extreme north of the heavens, and that he sent the frozen winds across the land, blighting all with their blasts of icy depth. We are going to stop there for the day. We are nearing an hour. Those are the stories that I wanted to tell you. I hope that you enjoyed all of them. I thoroughly enjoy all of them. If you want me to read any further, let me know. Or you can read them on your own, and then you can let me know which of these stories is your favorite. Again, these anthology ones I get are from like Epic Tales. It's from the Epic Tales collection, both of them. And I just love finding ghost stories or like just complete collections like this, you know, anthologies of spooky stories from each state. I think it's really fun, especially if you're visiting that state, to kind of look into it. So this is one that I was gifted a couple years ago of the vanished Texas coast. So very specific parts of Texas. It's only maritime lore, which is pretty cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I myself am feeling sleepy. I got this nice warm fireplace right here, which actually does give off heat if I want it to. And the lights are dim, so I hope you're feeling cozy and maybe ready for bed. At least relaxed and ready to have a good rest of your day. I am so glad that you guys are here. As always, make sure that you're drinking water, taking care of yourself, being the best version of yourself, going to the doctor if you need to. I hope to see you next week. If you haven't already, please subscribe down to my channel and share, like, comment, everything that you can to boost this out there. I'll see you next week. Bye.